All right, good.
Hello.
Hello. Nice. Looks like we'll probably have a few more people logging on here in just a minute, but we'll get started with just kind of overview stuff. Yeah, so just to start, is everyone's projects going okay for due at the end of this week? Any questions on those, concerns or anything?
When is it due again?
Friday, I believe. Is that what it says on Canvas? Can anyone confirm that?
I think it says the
Because
9th.
it says
on
9th.
Thursday.
The 9th. Okay. I'll change that to the 10th. I mean, but really, yeah, we'll have that last class or one more class on Thursday. I can check your guys' work that day, but let me double check. I'll change that due date to the Friday. So I'm just going to use that class on Thursday as like one last check-in if anyone has any questions, wants feedback on their work, and just needs any ideas or help saving their work or dealing with the digital files or anything like that. So you can check in with me like as you're getting close to finish next class as well. Let me just write this down really quick to change that due date. Oops. All right. Emma's just signing in. Okay, so yeah, that'll be due Friday. And if there are last minute questions, we can go over anything like that during next class. So, and then the following project after that, there's a specific time. Alicia, I think I'll just put it as like 4 o'clock on the Canvas, but if it's a little after that, that's okay. I know there's always kind of like little issues getting files saved and things uploaded. So if it's around that 4 o'clock, if it's a little after, that's fine. Don't like stress about that as like a super hard deadline. And if anyone ever needs like extra time on the projects, just reach out to me and let me know, and I'm happy to like work with you guys. I would rather you guys get the projects done and get them done well, rather than stressing about a deadline too much and not having your work done as high a quality. Okay. How about the tablets? Have people gotten tablets? Anyone there? That is.
Mine's coming on 9th.
Yours is coming on the 9th?
Yep.
So yeah, so okay, hopefully Thursday. Anyone else still waiting on theirs? Does anyone not have access to a tablet right now that's here in class today? All you guys have tablets? Okay, cool. So yeah, starting next week, we'll get a little bit more into like the technique and the use of Photoshop a little bit more. So the next project, you'll be choosing a handful of those of your storyboard individual frames and adding color to some of those. So we're going to start going over that process of working from that small thumbnail, which you guys did for your storyboard, making it a little bit larger, adding details, refining the design, and then adding color to that sketch. So you can work and you can continue to do your drawings in pen or paper if you want to do that, or if you have your tablet and you want to start drawing digitally, you can do that as well. And then, but you will definitely use your tablet for adding color to your illustrations. So we'll get into a little bit more of that digital technique stuff next week after you kind of turn in this first project. And now that everyone, it sounds like, has their tablets ready to go just about. All right. Okay, so for today, we're gonna just get in and talk about kind of introduction to color theory. Okay, so digital illustration obviously is the class, so we will be using digital tools to create our color, but we will be creating full color illustrations by the end of this class. And color is its own its own beast. It takes a lot to understand it, to be able to master it, and be able to use it effectively as you're working on your illustrations. But it's also very, very powerful. I've heard it described as like the most powerful emotional indicator when people are watching films or animation other than the music. Music is a very, very high, you know, when you're watching a movie and they have a certain type of music over a scene, that will affect your emotion. Then also directly related to that is the type of color people use. So you can use that to manipulate your audience's emotions, how they're reacting to your work, how they're reacting to a sequence of images, how they're reacting to your story. So you really want to really plan the use of your color and have a very kind of organized way that you're presenting the color in your illustrations, and doing it in a direct way, not where you're just kind of coloring in as if you're coloring a coloring book. That's what you kind of want to avoid. You want to try and make your color match the mood of the story, match what's going on in the story, match the different highs and lows of a story using that color, okay? So there's a bunch of different ways to do that. So we'll start to go over these. And again, there's a lot to go over just for color. We could have a full class just on the use of color, like go into color theory and all the different types of stuff. But I'll kind of simplify the color theory side of it down to the things that I found most useful for myself when creating work. The things that I've taken from other teachers and other artists I've seen that is kind of the most useful and most effective for the use of color, and then we'll directly talk about how to use that in your own illustrations, okay? So you guys, a handful, most people took Art 109 at some point, right?
Yep.
Yeah, so that class obviously was all just using value, right? So the reason that class is just value is because really how the values are placed in an illustration or a drawing or a piece of art kind of should take priority over how the colors are placed. So even though we're going to be talking about color, you still need to think about your illustration and the use of value in it. So we'll go over some ways also to kind of make sure you're keeping track of your values even when you're adding color, because there's so many possibilities when adding color that you don't want to lose track of how your values are organized in the piece as well. So we'll talk about that too, because when you're doing your thumbnail sketches, usually you kind of want to plan out your values when you're doing a thumbnail sketch, and then use that kind of as a guide when you start to apply color to an illustration to not lose track of those values. All right. So let me switch over to screen share here. We'll get this going. All right, so the biggest thing here for this class, and pretty much for any sort of illustration, oops, come on, tablet. Sorry, my tablet's malfunctioning. There we go. All right, color for mood. So again, this is the biggest thing I want people to kind of think about when you sit down to color an illustration, an individual frame in a comic book, whatever it may be, is you want to color for that mood. So you want to think about, what is this illustration? What do I want to do? Do I want to make this have a sense of action to it, and movement and excitement? Do I want it to be more calm and subdued? Do I want it to show a sense of love and companionship between these characters? Do I want to show, you know, a sense of horror or scariness? So all these different sorts of moods can be communicated through the types of shots you use, but then further emphasize with the type of color that you use, kind of mixed in with those different shots. Okay. And so don't ever worry about the reality of colors. So if you're coloring a tree, you know, you got the brown bark, the green leaves, don't worry about what something would look like in reality. You can color anything, any sort of color you make it. You want to make it and that will be more effective for getting that emotional reaction out of someone to color in a normal way. So just very simply, so that tree example I just said, we can color this in two different ways. One, just like kind of a standard way, and it depends on what you want to say about that scene. So if it's just kind of a normal scene, everyday scene, something that's not that exciting, that's when you can kind of just color things in a normal standard way. So we got, you know, blue sky, green tree, green grass, and brown tree trunk. That's kind of just like the normal way you would color, but you can color this any sort of way to create a more interesting statement about what you're drawing, and especially if it's a dramatic moment of the story, a scary moment of the story, just a moment in your story that you really want to bring attention to, you can color this all sorts of different ways. And there's so many options that you can do. And not one way is going to be right or wrong as you're working. But you can color this in all different sorts of ways. So we'll go over kind of some of these different color combinations you can choose and how they will affect your mood. So has anyone ever done worked with color before, like watercolor painting or oil painting, where you're like drawing from life to work that way? Yeah, if you ever have a chance to do that, I found that when I was learning color when I was in art school, drawing from life was the best way to learn it, because you could kind of, it forces you to look at something in reality and try and figure out what color it is, okay? So the best way I have to just kind of talk about color and pick colors and choose colors are these different ways. Hue, saturation, and value. So if you guys, are you guys familiar with these terms at all? People seen these before? So hue is just basically the color itself. Is it green? Is it red? Is it orange? Just kind of describing what color it is. Oh, and you'll also see this, instead of value, you'll also see this as brightness sometimes. That's how it's displayed in the Adobe program. So they have the HSB sliders. So I'll show you guys. I don't have it open right now, but this is a good way to just kind of use your color pickers. I use the hue, saturation, brightness sliders when I use Procreate as well, and when I use Illustrator, just as a way to kind of choose and pick my colors. All right, is anyone familiar with saturation, a saturated color? Do you guys know what that describes in a color? Yeah, Emma? Yeah.
Like, oh,
what was that?
In physical paint, it would be like how much of the pigment is in it. So like how heavily pigmented it is.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, it is helpful to think about it if you have worked with those traditional mediums before. So if you're working with watercolor, a saturated color would have very little water added to it. So it's almost like pure paint. With oil paint, you use like turpentine to water it down and it becomes more dull. Yeah, Cassandra said dull versus vibrant. So saturation is pretty much just the purity of color. So a pure color. So that is just a pure, when I'm looking at my little color picker right here, all these ones right here on the side are very saturated. So every color I pick from up in this section is going to be a very saturated color. Saturated red, blue as we go through here. So it's basically just bright, vibrant, and pure color. Okay. But the biggest thing when you are working with color, you want to limit saturation. So saturation is, again, very powerful, very eye-catching. That's why they make, you know, street signs out of bright green or bright yellow or bright orange colors. If you ever wear like a bright colored shirt to school or to see friends, people will always comment on that shirt. They'll always be like, oh, that's a really bright shirt. But if you just kind of look around the room you're in, everyone just kind of look around your room, and if you look for the most saturated thing, it will usually be a smaller object and there won't be a lot of it. Okay, so usually walls are painted in desaturated colors. You know, you'll usually use desaturated colors for, you know, linens and curtains and couches, things like that. And there will probably be just those small objects of bright saturated color as you look around. So in your illustrations, always limit saturation. So if you're doing a comic book page, you don't want every single panel to have saturated colors. If you're doing just a single illustration, you don't want the whole illustration to have saturated colors. Just pick and choose a few small areas to have that saturated colors. I think that's the biggest thing that kind of separates like art students' work versus professional artists' work. So they know how to really limit saturation and use it effectively in certain places. And then the value is just the lightness or darkness of a color. So here on this color slider here, I can choose any one of these hues. So I got a hue. So we start out with a nice bright blue, and then I can just make it darker just by turning down the value of this. So the hue is staying the same in all of these. It's that same blue. The saturation's even staying the same. I'm not changing the purity of the color. I'm just making the color darker. Okay, so these are really just kind of the main 3 terms that are very useful to talk about color. So I may say, when looking at a piece you're working on, okay, that sky is a really nice hue, but why don't you turn the saturation down a little bit and maybe the brightness can be increased a little bit, okay? Or when doing a painting and I'm painting from life and I'm looking at something, you know, a wall of a building, I might say, oh, that's a very desaturated, very light green. Okay, so it's good ways to just kind of think about color using these terms. But then also when we're talking about color, doing critiques and looking at each other's work and giving each other suggestions later on in the quarter, this is a good way to discuss those different types of work. All right, any questions on any of that? Makes sense for the most part? All right, and so once we get into this more and we start actually coloring your illustrations, all this stuff will start to make a little more sense when you're using it practically. All right, so another part of color theory is that colors have inherent kind of meanings and expectations and relationships that people already have with colors. Okay, so let's just look at some of these colors and think about the different relationships people have with those colors. Okay, so let's just start out. So does anyone have any emotional responses? Anything that, seeing that a big bright color of red, what sort of emotional response would you guys have to that if you saw it in a movie, if you saw it in real life? What is red associated with?
Danger.
Yeah.
Blood.
Danger. Yep. Blood.
Love.
Yep.
I would say rage.
Yep. So isn't that funny? Love and rage come from red. So I like to think of red as just heightened emotion, whether it's a positive emotion like love or an angry emotion like rage. Red is just a very, very powerful color. Represents heightened emotion. Obviously that danger, they use it for danger signs, the blood, love, heart, things like that. So these are kind of general associations that we already had that you can use these different things. They're not always going to have these associations, but if you want to think about it that way and use that in your illustrations, that can be like a good starting point. How about orange? What sort of associations do people have with orange?
Caution.
Yeah.
Warning.
Calm.
Caution. Yeah. Calm.
I guess it could be like warm.
Yeah, that's a good one. Warm. So warm, I really think of warm a lot. So like a setting sun, or have you noticed in your homes, do you guys have white light or orange tungsten lights in your houses and your living rooms and things like that?
They're like kind of orange tinted in
Yeah.
some places.
A lot of people, the warm kind of orangey lights are kind of what we have had in our houses for, decades. But then, in the last 10 to 15 years, people get like those LED lights and they have a very different color. So when you're working at school or in an office and they have those different color lights over it, it's a much whiter light. And it has a very different feeling than when you're, working at home in your living room and the couch and you have those orange lights on. So I also associate it with like warmth and kind of cozy feeling, a fireplace, things like that. How about blue?
Also calm, but sad.
Calm,
Sky.
Yeah. Sad can be.
Cold. Sky, sea.
Yeah. The sea, was that the water? Yeah.
Water, yeah. Vast.
Vast, yeah.
Empty.
How about
lost?
Lost, yep. How about a blue that's like this color of a blue?
That's like a happier.
Yeah, see? So it can also kind of change on the type of blue. So this is going to be a little happier. I read a book recently called Blue Mind, and it talks about just humans' association with the ocean and how we really respond to the blue of the ocean and the blue of the sky. And it really kind of puts us in a good mood when you see the sky filled with this kind of blue, especially in the Pacific Northwest. We really get in a good mood when we see that kind of blue
because it's rare.
Yeah, after we've been seeing a dull gray blue for months and months. It's really good. It's going to physically make us more excited, more happy with that. But yeah, just the slightly differences in blue too. So like a darker, more desaturated blue will have those kind of calmer, possibly sad connotations with it as well, where a more saturated, lighter value blue kind of has that happy, exciting feeling. How about green?
Envy.
Mm-hmm.
I put joy.
Yeah. Again,
Life.
Yeah. Life, yeah, that's kind of related to, plants, Mother Nature, things like that. Yeah, envy, that becomes like, so again, the range of different associations that we already have, so you can key in on those different things as you're working. And I kind of just use these as just kind of a way to start thinking about the colors I want to use for an illustration. How about yellow?
Happy.
Yep.
I think, I can't remember clearly, but I think in like Art 109, someone said that yellow reminds them of like fear.
Oh, I haven't heard that one before, but yeah, it's also different between cultures too. So like different cultures will have different associations with those colors.
I put hope.
Mm-hmm. One I really think of yellow is for kids.
Yeah.
Think of, why does McDonald's use yellow as one of their main colors?
Well, yellow and red together is scientifically proven to increase hunger.
Yeah, the appetites and the comfortable kind of appetites of that. So you see that yellow and red for a lot of fast food restaurants, McDonald's, Wendy's, In-N-Out. All right, what other colors do we have?
Purple?
Purple, yeah. Thank you, Jessica. Okay, what's purple?
I think of royalty.
Yeah.
Royalty. What does anyone know why it's associated with royalty?
Is it
Because back
it's-
in the day, the pigment to make purple was very rare and very hard to make.
Oh,
And so that's why kings and queens wore a lot of purple, because it was very expensive and it was very hard to make.
that's cool.
Hmm.
And it has lasted this long, that association. So like Royal Caribbean Airways, an airline, uses the purple for their logo and things like that. How about a brown?
Dirt.
Earthy.
Yeah.
Earth.
Is it bad if I say fried beans? Because that's all I think about.
That's what you associate it with.
Beans.
I think it's related to green a lot of ways when you're talking about like nature. Anything nature.
Yeah. But it feels like green is like, if this makes sense, green is like the good part of life, and then brown is like the bad part of life. That's what I think of. Because like green is more vibrant and stuff, I guess, and then brown is kind of more ugly. It's kind of like yin and yang. Because brown.
I always think of brown as like mountains, like mountain ranges, like actual Mother Earth. That's when I see brown. Or like the deserts.
That's fair.
And like the composting and like return
Yeah.
of nutrients. Yeah.
The
I think
cycle.
of skin tones.
Cycle. What was that one I missed?
Skin tones, because every skin tone
yeah.
needs a little brown in
Yeah.
in it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
those skin tones are all just kind of those slightly different shades of brownish, going from like the lighter pink down to the very dark browns too. So related to humans and skin tones. Then how about black?
Death.
Night.
Scary.
I think of galaxies.
Ooh, pretty.
I'll put space.
Or
Mhm.
blind.
I'll say for black, a big one is probably power. Like it is a very powerful color. If you see
Oh,
large areas of black in a drawing or illustration, it's going to feel very strong, very bold is another word I use for black.
loneliness.
That too, yeah.
And I think someone said mysterious
Oh yeah, there, yeah, in the chat.
and scary.
Mm-hmm.
Blind, maybe.
Mm-hmm. So this is all a very good, again, just a starting point, and this is kind of our gut relationship to these different colors. So if you want to think about, oh, I really want a nice calm scene in to start off my story. So that maybe you start with a shade of blue, okay? If I want to show an action scene with a lot of excitement, maybe I try an orange or a red. But you can always flip these things on their head and kind of you can play around with it and do the opposite of the association. So each thing has its full range of associations we make, but again, a good starting point to think about as you are just kind of trying to think about and brainstorm ideas of what you want to, what sort of colors you want to use for a given illustration. All right. Oh, yeah. Harmonious colors. So that should be the biggest goal when you're trying to figure out what colors you're going to fill up an illustration with, is you want to have a harmonious relationship of colors in your piece. And the way to think about that is try and think about an overall type of relationship for your colors rather than Again, as I mentioned, you don't want to just color it like a coloring book. You don't want to just put in, oh, peach for the skin, brown for the hair, blue for the sky. You want to think about an overall relationship of colors within your composition and within your piece of art. So there are some, I got a few different ones here that are kind of just like good starting points for different harmonious color relationships within an illustration. So some of these you guys may have heard of before. Some of you may have used before. Okay, monochromatic. So what is a monochromatic color relationship? Has anyone heard of that one?
It's usually like, well, commonly it's like black to gray, but it can also be like a single color with different shades.
Yep.
Like blue and darker blue.
Yep, exactly. So it's keeping that hue the same, and then you can mess with the value and the saturation as well. And then it will become a monochromatic thing. So you can create an entire illustration just out of one hue. So this, if you're ever questioning how do I want to get a good harmonious color relationship, monochromatic is kind of the easiest way to start out. It really takes a lot of the guesswork out of there. You just choose one hue that you like, and then just change that value of different objects and different things in your composition. And all those colors will automatically look good together because they're all the same hue. So you're not changing anything else about them. You're just changing the brightness and the saturation. So just keeping that as a you can create full illustrations just with that monochromatic relationship. Complementary colors. Okay, so this is two colors. Have you guys ever made a color wheel before?
Yes.
Did you enjoy it?
Not really.
No way.
But yeah, I get it now.
No, it is a very valuable thing to do if you guys ever have
I have a color wheel that I did on the color theory.
Oh, for color theory, yeah. Opposite green and red. Okay. So you guys, when you, I would suggest kind of just doing a very simple digital version of this. So complementary colors are basically just colors opposite of each other on the color wheel. So it will always be what's opposite each other. So we got red goes with green, orange and blue, and then purple and yellow. This is one of the most common ways I come up with with my kind of color schemes in my work. It's very quick. I can say, okay, if I make the foreground green, then I can make the background red, and it'll automatically look good together. Maybe if I'm doing this one, maybe I have everything's monochromatic in blue, except for my focal point of my character can be orange, and that'll stand out. So since they're kind of opposites colors, they will look good together, but they also make each other stand out. So if you have a scene with a lot of blue in it, whatever it may be, you can put just a little dot of orange. That little dot of orange is going to get a lot of visual attention as you're looking at it. How about primary colors?
Isn't that those ones that can't be made? It's just the solid color itself, like red, blue, and yellow.
Yep. So those are the starting colors. Yeah, you can't mix those colors. They just start there. Three most basic types of color to start with. Okay, so you can do compositions just using primary colors. And what kind of look does this have? Does this kind of, do those color groups kind of give you guys a feeling grouped together?
Elementary.
Yes. They are much more elementary. So you'll see this, Superman is all complementary colors. So he's designed for kids, little kids, little kids' bedrooms, kids' toy games, things like that are lots of times those saturated primary colors. And secondary will oftentimes look a little bit more sophisticated. It will look just a little bit more visually interesting to have those secondary colors. And it just can be a nice group of colors that you choose to work with. So here, the biggest thing here when you're working with the color wheel, you rarely want to use all the colors, okay? So you want to just choose a certain section of that color wheel. It may be colors next to each other, maybe just one color, maybe those complementary colors across from each other. It may be just your primary colors, just your secondary colors, but you rarely want to use every single color you have available to you. So related to primary, secondary, and monochromatic is analogous. Now, how do I spell this? No. You guys, has anyone heard of analogous before? Those are just colors that are close to each other on the color wheel. So it would be like just blues and purples. Blue, a blue purple, and then a pure purple. So those are all going to be, analogous colors because they're near each other on that color wheel, and that can be another good way to do that. But again, you're not choosing colors from the entire thing or from the entire color wheel. All right. How are we doing on time? Let's just say saturated versus desaturated. Sorry about this writing saturated. So that's just basically, maybe you can use all desaturated colors. So a bunch of desaturated colors. So all these are kind of duller blues. And then you can use one area of maybe the complement of blue. Maybe we'll do a really bright orange right next to it. So using mostly desaturated colors and just one little hit of saturated. And also warm versus cool. So our warm colors are what?
Red, yellow, orange.
Yep.
I guess pink could be counted as one, but
Yep, pink's a warm color as well. But pink is really a desaturated
red.
light red. And then the cool colors are blues.
Purples and greens.
Yep. So this can be, again, a good way to design that. So I oftentimes think about foreground versus background with the warm versus cool. So a lot of times warm colors will feel closer to you and cool colors feel further away. So you can do like all your foreground objects and things in warm colors and then backgrounds and cools. You can flip it and do all your foreground things in cool colors and backgrounds and warms. But this is very related to those complementary colors because a lot of those complementary colors end up being warm versus cool as well. Okay.
Is this like mainly for our second project too?
Yeah, this won't be no color on the first project. So once we get into the second project, yeah, I will be expecting to see some of these different relationships. So I think I'll have you guys do 4 small, quick illustrations for the second project, and I'll have you choose for these different sorts of color relationships to use in that. So you can do monochromatic for one, complementary for one, primary colors for one, and warm versus cool for another one. Okay. So that's a good way to think about it. Any questions on any of these?
Is it okay to use the colors that are not complementary in design?
Yeah. So you don't always have to use complementary colors. Again, just limit the colors that you want. So you could use all analogous colors. So these ones are not complementary. They're just kind of all those cool colors. And they're close to each other on the color wheel. So you can choose your color palette that way instead.
Okay.
So the biggest thing is just limit those color selections. Is there another question?
Yeah, if it's okay to ask about like color themes, I guess, in society. Is that okay?
Yeah. What do you
Okay.
have?
Yeah, for like red and green,
Mhm.
I'm just gonna use Christmas because it's a big holiday. Why is like red and green associated with Christmas and stuff?
Good question.
Because like they're opposite colors, but like when most Christians or something look at them, they're like, ah, it's Christmas.
They're
Yeah.
actually complementary colors.
Yeah, they probably started to get used because they were complementary colors, and then we just became associated with that over time. I mean, if I see this color and this color and this color together, I think of the Seahawks. So we just start
Yeah.
to
Sorry, you
have,
froze.
am I there?
Yeah.
I'll give it a sec to catch up. So we do start to just become ingrained with these different relationships over time. So yeah, obviously the Christmas colors, Halloween has a very strong color relationship. Sports teams have strong color relationships. Schools use specific colors. Advertising campaigns use specific colors to evoke the feeling of a business or a brand. And because they are so powerful, we do really become, emotionally associated with certain color combinations like Christmas and different things as well. But there's a number of really good books that go into the deep science behind colors, our psychological reaction to colors and things like that. There's a whole bunch there to learn about and get deeper into in terms of all these different color relationships. But that's an interesting question there. Anything else on this? All right. So remember when we were talking about our calm action for our storyboards? And these can be related to when we get into talking about designing a comic page as well. Same thing with color. Okay, so I like to think of action as being saturated colors. So whatever the color may be, action can be associated with a bright green, bright yellow. That could be even more saturated. Whatever it may be, a bright saturated color. And then the calm colors can be anything that's more desaturated. Okay, so as you're designing a certain layout for a story, a comic, whatever it may be, you want to limit how you're placing your colors. So maybe start out kind of desaturated here, kind of just blues and greens that are desaturated is the overall color for that scene. And then you can hit them with that exciting, bright color. And then close off again with that desaturated color. So, but if you're using those saturated colors through the whole story, it's like using those dramatic angles for every single shot too. You don't want to do that. People will get overwhelmed by too many bright saturated colors, and things like that. So just limit that saturation from exciting moments in that story, whether an exciting thing's going on or heightened emotions, whether it's love or anger or fear. Wait and use those bright saturated colors for the appropriate moment in your story. Now let's look at this. So here's some very, very quick little examples here. So we can just look, and I'll very quickly add some color to some of these, and you can see what how I think about this. So this one, just a nice close-up portrait of a person, very quick, loose sketch. But for this could be a nice one to use kind of a monochromatic pinks and reds here in this one. So I'm just going to put down that very quick kind of pink color to start. And as I fill in everything else, I'm just going to be adjusting the values on these and maybe a little bit on the saturation. So I'm just getting a darker value for the hair. For this little section of bushes, maybe it's brighter, but I make it a little bit more desaturated. Oh, we got to go into that too. So look how this color looks next to all those pinks. What does this color here look like? You start to mess with that saturation. You can play with how those colors relate to one another. So this almost kind of starts to look more blue or green, but really it's just because it's a desaturated version of that same hue. So I didn't change the hue at all. I didn't move the slider. It's just choosing all these different values and saturations from within there. All right, so how about this one where we got kind of foreground and background? So let's do a complementary color scheme for this one. So what complementary color should I use for this one with our little hero guy on the building?
Orange and blues. That's what I would use.
Okay, so where should I put the oranges? Where should I put the blues in here?
I would put like the oranges on the superhero, and then maybe the buildings, and then the blues in like the background.
Sure, that sounds like a good idea. Yeah, so there's no right or wrong way to do this, but I like that orange and blue. We know that'll be a good color setup. Actually, that's good to do. Another tip I'll show you guys on the videos coming up next week or so. But when you start a piece, you want to just get rid of the white. Okay, so if I'm looking at white, it'll kind of mess up how my color relationships are forming. So there, we got some warms in the foreground. Then let's go to that blue there in the background. And then I want a nice saturated orange for my character here. So there, that looks like a pretty nice, very simple, warm or complementary colors here. So we got blue background, warm foreground, and that is going to just kind of set us up. If I was to make this into a finished thing, I would go into more details, get slightly different shades of oranges in here for like brick textures as I'm working. We'll talk about how to design shadows later on and choose colors for shadows, and how those are related to those, but that overall color scheme here is working. All right, so how about this scene of the sailboat? What if I wanted to make that feel like a very calm, soothing, relaxing scene? What sort of color, either relationship, or what's the first color I should kind of put down in that scene?
Blue.
Yeah. Go for kind of a light desaturated blue. All right. So that's looking good. Let's say I wanted to make my sailboat stand out in this scene. What color should I use for that to stand out? There's a couple different things I could do, but what's one option?
I would use like a vibrant purple just so it can like draw the viewer's eye to that.
Yeah. So that's kind of so that becomes that's kind of an analogous color of that, so we know it should work well. And then the fact that that's the most saturated color, that will kind of grab more attention in there. So I think that's a good way to do it. Does someone have their mic unmuted? I can get like back on here. Sing, do you want to try and mute yours? Does anyone hear that double? I'm getting like an echo effect.
What?
There. Is that better? I think that's better. All right. So now how about this action? Oh, no, it didn't work. Sing, I'm going to mute you there. See if that works. Okay. How about this this action scene with the car chase? What color should I put down for that one?
Like a
Probably,
red.
yeah, red. Warm color, just maybe.
Yeah, something bright, something exciting. There we go. So we could leave this as monochromatic and just do all shades of red, but maybe we try and then we put a bright green on this bright red. So this becomes a very jarring relationship because it's two very saturated colors, two contrasting complementary colors. So I would not want to use this very much. It works if it's just kind of one panel in a comic or one frame in a movie, but if I was to do a full series of illustrations, I would want to tone down that color relationship. But for just this one kind of shot, this exciting moment in the story, it works for that. So again, these are very rough, very loose versions, but it does help you to plan out your overall color theme and color relationships for an illustration. And we'll go in more to like the technical side of how to do it using Photoshop, how to apply it using layers and brushes, how to design, you know, the color of a shadow when you're working with different things. But for the overall color theme and the overall mood, this is kind of what will be helpful for you guys to think about. Now let's look at some other artists here that have done it very well, and we can see what sort of color relationships these other artists are using. All right, this is the artist Darwin Cook. What sort of color relationship here is he, or what sort of color palette is he using here?
Monochromatic yellow.
Yep. So very simple, very limited color palette. So that's another way to think about it, as a limited color palette. So he's just using that yellow, black, and white pretty much. And it kind of creates a very harmonious look for everything. You know everything will work well together because he's limiting the colors in that. Oh, here's an example I made, just an idea to see how color can affect your mood. So I just did this drawing of a house. So it's the same drawing, but different color schemes for each one. So what kind of feeling do you guys get from this one in the upper right?
Cheerful,
Yeah.
peaceful.
So that's all pretty much primary colors. So blues, reds, a little bit of highlights of yellows on the trees, but pretty much natural colors. But then that big bit of blue sky is overall very cheerful and happy. How about, what kind of color scheme is this one on the upper left?
For me, the upper left and the one diagonal to it, that's like, they both kind of have the same kind of calming effect.
Mm-hmm. For this upper left one, go ahead.
It's almost like an evening or like almost nighttime scene.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So for the upper left one, I was doing secondary colors. So purple, greens of the trees, and then oranges. So these brown is really just a dark desaturated orange. So that's what was this one. And this one I was trying to imitate like a sunset, so using more gold and yellow and orange colors, kind of the warm feeling. And then this one, desaturated, darker colors to get kind of a scary or more creepy feeling. So same drawing, colored in different ways, will have different emotional effects.
For the bottom left house in the picture,
Mm-hmm.
even though they are like all the same one, but the color makes it really it look like an abandoned building, like it's no one has ever entered in that building, and it's like all broken and stuff. But when you look at others, it's like, nope, it's not that broken.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it looks like the house that you would avoid if you were like 8 on Halloween.
Yes, yeah, exactly. And you can get, these are exaggerated from reality a bit, but you can get all of the close to these sorts of different lighting conditions in reality. So this would be on a dark, rainy day or rainy evening, one at sunset, one at the middle of the day on a sunny day. So you can get the, not quite as far this range, but you can get a range of these different colors even with reality. So you will only really get this bright saturated colors of blue sky in the middle of a day on a sunny day. That's the only time you'll see that color. When the sun's rising or setting, the colors are different. When there's clouds, it's different, things like that. So think about this as you're going into color scene. What do you want the impact to be on the viewer? Okay, here's a Norman Rockwell painting. So what color kind of color scheme is he using for this one?
Complementary.
Yep, and what colors?
Red and green.
So there's that red and green and together. But you see, you know, a variety of shades of green. So the wall is probably the most saturated green, but his suit jacket looks like a very, very desaturated light green. And all these variety of shades of red, where you get kind of a more earthy, brownish red, desaturated red, but then you get a little bit of the bright red on the chair, along the ground. The dresser here is kind of a reddish orange, but a little bit more desaturated. But overall, he probably had a very loose, very rough version that looked in his own style, but like this, where he was just planning out the reds and greens. But then he added more details and more subtlety in it when he created the final piece. How about this one? This is a panel by Tim Sale. Kind of color scheme in this one.
It looks like you just used the only primary colors to me.
Yeah.
Yep, primaries, and then kind of ordering it with the two warmer ones for the foreground and then the cooler blue for the background. So placing those primary colors in specific places too is going to help things come forward and things go backwards. All right, we're almost out of time. Here's a very desaturated one where everything is very, very desaturated. I really like desaturated colors. It tends to look a lot more sophisticated, where you get just a little stripe of saturated green right here through the middle. But other than that, everything is very desaturated.
It looks kind of gloomy.
Exactly. It's going to have that emotional effect on you to get that kind of gloomy, more calm feeling. All right, so we're almost out of time. So that'll be it for today. Did you guys see the videos I uploaded on YouTube?
Yep.
Okay, go on there. Those next round of videos shows you guys everything you will need to know to complete the first project. So it shows you how to do some sketching, whether you want to sketch digitally or if you're drawing on paper, that's fine. It shows you how to kind of adjust if you are taking photos of your artwork. To turn it in that way, how to make some adjustments so it looks better and looks ready for presentation. And then also how to assemble it as a PDF file, okay? So I do want things turned in as a PDF file with multiple pages in it, so it shows you how to do that. There's two ways to do it. One is using Adobe Illustrator. If you guys have and are paying for Photoshop, you can install Illustrator. If you're not able to do that, I know it is kind of a headache to kind of learn just a little bit of that new other program. I showed you a website that can also create a PDF from a series of JPEG files, okay? All right, so come with any last minute questions on the project. To next class, we'll have a little bit of lecture, but also if anyone wants feedback on their work before the due date, you can email me later today, tomorrow, or we can talk about it on Thursday during class, okay?
Okay.
All right, guys, good luck working on that project, and we'll just keep plugging along.
Have a good day.
Yep,
Bye.
You too.
too.
Bye.
See ya.